have a headache, and yet still here we are having a beautiful live stream. Thank you everybody for being here. So what we're gonna be doing today is practicing a talk that I am in the process of preparing for a psychedelic symposium. I was invited to talk at the Psychedelic Research Symposium in King's College, from King's College London, in London. It's going to be happening in about 4 or 5 days. And I'm completely overwhelmed. I said I'm going to talk about psychedelics as a spiritual practice. And now I have just come to the realization what kind of event it is, who I'm gonna be speaking amongst, and I feel completely overwhelmed with the preparation of this presentation. As there's so many nuances and there's so many ideas, and my head is just exploding. I don't know if that is why I have a headache, or if it's still lingering because I've been sick for the past week. It's probably a combination of both. Short song for the beginning, just as always, before we jump into this. I want to practice this presentation with you, and I want to contemplate basically with you guys, and would love your input as well on what's the core of this? What's the core of this topic of seeing psychedelics as a spiritual practice? And yes, if you might have noticed, I did get a little bit of a haircut. Stand up to the power of the mountain. Love is the spring, my body is the fountain. I drink from the center of the sun. My soul, it is the infinite one who feels the beat of the drum, drum, drum. Stand up to the power of the mountain. Love is the spring, my body is the fountain. I drink from the center of the sun. My soul, it is the infinite one who feels the beat of the drum, drum, drum. Okay, enough music for now. Greetings, Woody D. Good to see you here, brother. So where to begin? Where to begin? I have got no clue on where to begin this approach. So I'll just share a little bit of background on what I have already contemplated kind of so far, and where I kind of like faced some blocks and considerations, and where I'm overthinking stuff. So as this is going to be quite an academic setting, I suppose, I was thinking is like, am I going to make this proposal, this presentation, this argumentation a highly scientific one? Will I have to back up every one of my claims, every one of my statements with a quote, not just from mystical traditions or from religious cultures, but also from scientific research regarding spirituality and the nature of spirituality and spiritual practice or mysticism, or research just regarding psychedelics and the result of that. And I'm a little bit aware about that field, but as I've been kind of like putting together the structure of the talk, I was like, wow, this is going to be like lots of work. And I have my presentation basically that I published recently to pull from. It's the first link in the video description. You can watch that full presentation right there, where I kind of like started to structure out a little bit of a discussion around psychedelics as a tool or mechanism or technology for self-realization, for spiritual practice. And as spiritual practice as well, kind of like highlighting a little bit of the potential, but also the nuances and the questions that are arising in this field. But this presentation right there and the argumentation right there, it went quite far. It went quite deep into very difficult territory to wrap our mind around, and even and it's very radical in its nature, kind of like this proposal, and the language around it, the framing around it regarding God and self-realization and the purpose of this life, and it's all very lofty kind of terms. So that's one thing. Then another thing is, right, kind of like the nature of the presentation itself. And hey, UL Adams, I'll get to your comment right now. The other one is the nature of a presentation. Like, what kind of presentation am I aiming to give? Is it a simple scientific argumentation, as it's kind of like appropriate in that setting, maybe in the academic setting, or is it gonna be an engaging presentation with lots of personal insight, personal stories? How much and how appropriate is it to bring this in, or how to balance it out? And all of these questions were in my mind, and still kind of like to make it basically emotional, novel, memorable, right? Engage the audience, but also be very careful in my presentation, because I do have a value of truth, right? And that's why I'm like, I don't know, I have difficulty really doing lots of presentations. And I just talk off the cuff here in these live streams or in my usual videos, other than my presentation. And it's like, it's hard for me to really present something, because I'm like, I do want it to be true. I do want it to be scientific in a sense, right? I have my own kind of like workings of, I'm not working academically, but I do have a kind of like a certain standard for presenting information. So that's kind of like another aspect. And then another aspect that basically flowed into this is that, yes, I do want to speak authentically. Yes, I do want to speak from passion. Yes, I do want to speak from what I am actually realizing and embodying, and the authentic insights that I have gathered on my journey and in my observations. But also, see, I have such a headache, I can't even, I lost my thought there. But also I wanted to be backed up, basically, I wanted to be true. Like, I wanted to be logical, I wanted to make sense, I don't want there to be loopholes, basically, in the argumentation. And it's such a fascinating thing. And the nature of spirituality and psychedelics themselves have brought me to this realization that I don't know shit. So it's like, that's basically then what I imagine the presentation to be about the paradox of psychedelic work, to let it be about the incomprehensibility from to capture the essence of this topic in language. So the aim of the presentation is going to be something that will inspire, invoke, break open the minds of the audience, and not leave them with any conclusions or facts, but rather with more questions, and with an inspiration and a little contemplation around the complexity of this topic and the reality that we don't know, really. We can't really say, like, okay, this is the ultimate framework for psychedelics as a spiritual practice. And as I'm not an expert in each of these like specific fields, like psychedelic Buddhism or ayahuasca traditions or any of them, right, or the non-dual traditions in conjunction with spirituality and psychedelics, I can't go into a specific nuanced argumentation and exploration of any one of these, so I want to keep a big picture perspective, basically. So, Yoel, what are you saying? Have you looked into how spiritual practices can become your everyday rituals, the things that you see as right becoming the things you do? Yes. this is basically the core, right, of a spiritual practice. See, and this is where it begins. This is where the presentation begins. Because what is a spiritual practice is going to be the first question that we're going to be asking ourselves. So, based on that, another consideration regarding the presentation I had was then not to base it on back it up with any lofty religious spiritual terms from different traditions, and not back it up with scientific data, but double down on kind of like just my authentic insight that I believe to be true enough for this presentation based on personal observations. And it's scary, it's daunting. Like there's lots of fear of being judged coming up, lots of like this imposter syndrome. Who am I to talk about this? Like, am I gonna be like, it's insane what's coming up for me here. But this is kind of like another approach that I think I might want to try here in this live stream now. So the presentation is probably going to be around 45 minutes long. So I just want to jump in with you here live and have a little bit of a look on time as well, not talk too much around the whole issue, but really keep it simple, concise, short, and practical and human as well, for us to explore this topic together. So ready, let's jump in. Let's not waste any more time talking about anything. And yeah, I don't know what's gonna come out of this. I have a loose structure kind of like prepared that I wanted to kind of like use as a framework for my presentation, but I don't know what now will come up authentically, what I want to include, how much am I gonna expand on things or back things up or relate things, and this is just kind of like the purpose of this video right here right now, that I want to see what's coming up, that see what's emerging from the center of my heart. And it's difficult, I recognize, to do that with a headache, but we'll do anyways. Okay, I have a stopwatch, and I'm gonna start the stopwatch and see where we get to in 45 minutes, and maybe we'll do some breaks like here and there just to follow up on the chat. But yeah, okay. See, I'm so overwhelmed. Like I'm resistant to start this timer, because like I have this like, okay, what am I gonna talk about? Like, what the fuck is it? What is happening? Because it's so complex, it's so nuanced, and I want to make it simple but fitting for an academic setting. It's hilarious. Okay, I'm just gonna start. Okay, hey, so I come on. I'm like, hey everybody, what a wonderful opportunity to be here. Thank you very much. Today we're gonna be talking about psychedelics as a spiritual practice. What does that even mean? And I don't know how too much to share about my background, right? Because I am just a dude, basically, that has been exploring this topic of psychedelics as a spiritual practice for the past 9 years. As I kind of like discovered psychedelics and spirituality at the same time. And that inspired me to start this complex contemplation of basically asking myself the question, who am I? And so, as I have no academic background, no degrees, no group affiliations, and I don't belong to any group of people, or I don't hold any strong beliefs, I'm just going to present what I experienced and what I observed as kind of like an inspiration for you to take into whatever field, whatever practice, whatever belief system or whatever else you want to take this into. Because I believe that there's some fundamental human principles that flow through this topic of psychedelics as a spiritual practice that every single field can take some value out of. And basically for the past 4 or 5 years, I've also kind of like spent lots of my time just researching on my own. Not in the academic sense, but just I've been trying to create an online course about psychedelics, and I have never published it because I could not come to a satisfactory point of presenting information of this infinitely vast and mysterious field in a way that aligned with my value and desire to communicate truth. So basically the one central piece I have come across is that psychedelics bring us to paradox. They really brought me to a sense of wonder and not knowing, because that's one of their crucial key functions, right? They shatter the certainty that we do have. And so in this talk I want to inspire you and explore kind of like a perspective around the paradox of psychedelics as a spiritual practice, both as tools for deep transformation as one category and as reminders that there's nothing to attain at all. So yeah, this is to provide a perspective, not an answer. And I want to kind of like challenge you to reflect or inspire you to reflect on your own spiritual journey and understanding, and open your mind rather than present any particular conclusions in this field. So, I have a question for you. What is spirituality? What do you think? What do you think is spirituality? Feel free to write your answers in the chat. Write whatever is coming up for you. Or I plan to gather the information from the audience. Because that question is far more profound than we anticipate, right? It's very profound to ask even the question what spirituality even is, right? And I don't want to give you an answer. I like, there's probably as many answers to that question as there's human beings on this earth. As it seems to be, it's such an intangible, like personal thing. And then from this mystery of the question what spirituality is, and if we can even separate it from life itself, right? The question also becomes what is a spiritual practice? What is a spiritual practice? See, and this is where my mind is starting to break. Like I can't get any further in this contemplation. Because I would say that spirituality is nothing different than life itself, and spiritual practice might be to explore our relationship to life, to existence, to reality. Maybe also revolving around the question, who am I? Right? This sense of self-exploration, self-understanding. Understanding who we are, what we're doing here, and basically what our nature is. And these terms are also very lofty, right? spirituality and spiritual practice might be to develop a relationship and an understanding around life, existence, our own existence, our self. I would also say truth. Yeah, for me, lots of spirituality is an inquiry into truth, right? It's and it's also about questions of the nature of reality, but also how to engage with reality. Because I don't see that, right? If we see spirituality as life itself, then your spiritual practice doesn't end when you stop meditating, right? When whatever meditation even is, when you get off the cushion, when you don't read in that scripture anymore, then spirituality doesn't end there. It's a deeply interconnected process from our perspective that shapes how we are in the world, how we engage with the world, how we see the world. And then also we have these words like divine and transcendent and the nuances between an ego or an higher self. Like, I get so confused by all of these. Mainly because I'm in a state of confusion right now. But basically the core principle that I want to lay out here and present here is threefold. First of all, seeing psychedelics as a spiritual practice on the relative level, on a progressive path or model of spirituality. Basically saying we get from A to B, from ignorance to clarity or enlightenment, from being asleep to being awake, right? From being selfish to being selfless. And we operate in this dualistic notion and see psychedelics as a modality to support that process from A to B. Then the second part that I want to present is kind of like more from the absolute perspective of psychedelics being a practice of detached appreciation, of more like as a practice of realization or deepening realization and embodiment, transcending the need to use them for anything. And the third one is then kind of like coming to terms with the paradox of the first two and integrating that notion. And integration itself, looking at integration itself. Okay, Joel, what are you saying? Trying not to interject so that you can keep your flow. Thank you. I know when you're on a certain path, if you get shifted to another one, then you have to get back to that path by taking the other path to it. To me, spirituality is more everything and nothing. See? What does that even mean, right? Everything and nothing. When I found the body, the puppet in the whole world is a stage, I realized one was not the puppet, but the strings that moves everything on the stage, and even is what those things are made of. Yeah, so exactly. See, and then there's also the nuances in this presentation that when we say psychedelics, what do we even mean by psychedelics? And I guess for simplification purposes, we can say that we're just talking about the classic serotonergic psychedelics like LSD and psilocin and NN or 5-MeO-DMT here to facilitate these, because every one of these substances in different dosages has also kind of like a little bit of a different angle to tackle or support these principles that I want to go into. So that's another kind of like nuance. So the first idea then is basically the view that spirituality is a journey, right? We are on a spiritual path. We have stages of development. And this is seen everywhere in religious and mystical traditions. And see, here is a side note as well. I don't know how much it makes sense to include frameworks of religious and mystical traditions, because there's so many different nuanced understandings of all of these that I feel bad simplifying all of these down to these simple notions. It's ridiculous to me. But in Buddhism, we can say we have the Noble Eightfold Path. We have a progression towards nirvana. We have in Christianity the sanctification, a spiritual purification over lifetime. In Hinduism, we have the four rajas, or methods of progressive realization, right? To saying we come towards a union with God in yoga. We have Sufism and kind of like the Tarika, a path of stages leading to divine union. We have also psychological models that kind of like address this, saying Maslow's hierarchy of needs, going up from survival needs to relational needs to somehow then this self-actualization or moving to self-transcendence. And also Ken Wilber talks a lot about spiritual growth as stages of development. He's making the distinction that states of consciousness are not stages of development, and that we can basically have these universal stages of development that are also seen in cognitive and developmental psychology, like Piaget and Kohlberg and Kegan, and all of these like have mapped out certain maps of development that a human being can go through, and basically it's a journey of consciousness evolution. And also even studies and on meditation and neuroplasticity show that spiritual practice rewires the brain over time, speaking to an actual progression of spirituality, of spiritual development. And then we can see psychedelics as a tool, or kind of like an ally, a support in facilitating that transformation, that coming from A to B, that ascension of the journey, that being more spiritual to a certain degree, and they can do that in many different ways. Here I want to present and go into just 4 of them. There's probably more, but there's 4 key ones that I want to present here, and that I want to go into a little bit more further in depth with. One is the cultivation of traits, spiritual traits. 2 is them being a tool or facilitation for gaining or remembering insight. 3 is the practice of dying, and 4 is an experience of the absolute. And as a foundation, even to back that up, for many, spirituality, psychedelics as a facilitation of spirituality or as a spiritual practice is is not the centerpiece of one's spirituality. Like, inherently it can't be, because it's a temporary peak experience. And so it has to be in conjunction with other practices and a constant, genuine kind of like work that is going on, even while you are not in the psychedelic experience. That's why we put so much emphasis and importance on the intention. If there's no intention for spirituality or psychedelics as a spiritual practice, then their effectiveness in that sense might be diminished, even though they hold the potential for a spiritual experience when you go to a festival and you just drop 600 mics of acid. Nevertheless, people have just weird experiences, fun experiences, alien experiences, and they're not even noticing that they hold a transformative potential, or that there is a spiritual kind of like aspect to the experience itself. Or we can see people who are doing psychedelics and have very negative intentions, manipulative intentions, egoic intentions, and that gets amplified in the field as well. There's lots of weird examples out there. So it's also related to this genuine desire for, as we mentioned, what spirituality is, for truth, for self-understanding, for self-realization, for self-inquiry. And it has to come in conjunction with practices like meditation or yoga or self-inquiry or contemplation or chanting or praying or other practices that we pull from in the psychedelic experience, that we might even use to facilitate the journey itself. So the set and setting, right, is also playing a crucial role then in the psychedelics' effectiveness for spiritual development. Because when we adjust the set and setting and the intention and kind of like have a framework and a container around our practice with psychedelics, it enhances the potential for a more desired result, namely the development, progressive development onto the stages of spiritual development. And we increase the potential for a so-called awakening experience or a mystical experience to occur. And I don't even know how true that is. Because also, as a side note, that's also kind of like always the consideration that nothing is ever guaranteed. That we shall not expect anything in the psychedelic journey, but that goes more into the second half of this presentation. So they hold a potential for this. Like, that it doesn't necessarily have to be that way or have to be actualized that way. Because as much as they hold a potential for a progression on the spiritual kind of like developmental path, they hold a potential to disrupt that, for people to get more into self-deception, delusion, being lost, feeling confused, not having a grounded spiritual kind of like understanding that of life. So that points to the difficulties of integration, pitfalls and dangers on the way. But nevertheless, first of all, I would like to go into psychedelics. That's the notion that psychedelics cultivate spiritual traits. Basically, I see psychedelics as a spiritual training ground for these different characteristics. Because the very act of conscious, intentional psychedelic journeying seems to be inherently facilitating the cultivation of these traits. And by that I mean not just the journey itself, but the preparation, the navigation, so the journeying, and the integration. All of them kind of like flow together and bring out these characteristics, or hold a potential ground for us to develop and gain insight into all of these traits and cultivate them within ourselves. For example, courage is one of them. Inherently, when you go into a deep psychedelic journey, or when you go into your first psychedelic journey, there has to be a certain kind of courage that you will have to build up in order to face that unknown, in order to go into the experience. And then in the experience itself, you gotta be holding up that courage. You just can't look away anymore, because you're faced then to with that present experience of your life, and you'll go into that. So courage is one, faith is another one, forgiveness is another one, compassion, letting go and surrender, trust, maturity, patience, commitment, responsibility, engagement, a willingness to face truth, radical honesty, authenticity, integrity, open-mindedness, humility, non-judgment, playfulness, lightheartedness, humor, connection, resilience, curiosity, appreciation, gratitude, love, acceptance, intuition, and also body awareness, or relaxation, or breath awareness. These are, the last two are not characteristics, but these are characteristics that I have kind of like observed in my own journey, that have been cultivated through a consistent engagement in psychedelic space. Because in psychedelics are a training ground for surrender. When you're just like in your ordinary state consciousness and your normal sitting practice of meditation, you might be asking yourself like, okay, I surrender into the moment, but what does that even mean? How do I surrender right now? And what does that entail? How do I let go of things? And then in psychedelic space, we have an opportunity to be seeing that anaconda, to be seeing that demon, to be seeing that angel, and we're like, whoa, what is this? But then there has to be a willingness to face the truth, to face the reality of that experience, and then to let go into that, right? So we are actually surrendering, we are practicing that act and that trait and that skill of surrender in the experience itself. So then we can take it onwards in our integration as well and say like, okay, now I know what surrender means. And the same goes for example, honesty. Oftentimes in psychedelic space we are faced with the truth of ourself, right? People come to realizations of different aspects of themselves, of behaviors, of ways of being in the world, and there has to be, there's just like a confrontation with this. And from that follows kind of like an engagement in the practice of honesty, of also realizing how you want to be, and then maybe integrating that as a sense of authenticity, seeing this playful, non-judgmental, connected being that emerged, or that version of yourself that emerged in psychedelic space. And then the integration becomes to take that on and take that playfulness into your day-to-day life. And then maybe you go back into psychedelic space and you experience that again. You connect with that playfulness again. You're exploring how it actually works to be playful. Because you have this window of opportunity that opens you up, that opens connects your neural networks and opens you into this expanded state consciousness. And the same goes for all of these other traits. Okay, actually, I'm noticing that I'm getting really like tired right now because of the headache, so I might not be able to um, completely finish the live stream. Excuse me regarding that. But this is basically the the point of psychedelics being a tool for helping us cultivate what we might call spiritual traits. Hey Kali, how's it going? Joel is saying, this is the thing that all people are always doing, drawing a map and putting it in a form or simplification, even the simple stories that we talk to the children. Exactly. Because we have to. We have no other, like, I don't know what's the alternative, right? And we see these traits, basically, some of these traits, we see them we see that being validated in some of the psychedelic research, which has shown that there is a kind of long term, not fully long term, but there is a longer term potential for increased connection, for increased sensitivity, for increased intuition, compassion, nature connectedness, maybe even less anxiety, right? Less fear, more trust in life, more patience with oneself, more curiosity, more gratitude and appreciation. But especially with these traits, an integration and a conscious approach to this work and a continuous engagement in cultivating and developing and integrating these traits is essential. Right? The journey alone is not going to do that for you, but it acts as a practice. Kali is saying, I went to the psychiatrist and he told me that I don't actually have a predisposition to schizophrenia. Psychedelics are back on the tracks. Woohoo! So happy. Nice beard shave. Yeah, thank you. And I'm happy for you. Thank you for sharing that and for updating me. That's beautiful to hear. So the second approach on the progressive kind of linear relative approach towards spiritual development is that psychedelics might act as a facilitation for gaining or remembering insight or gaining perspective about what we said relates to spirituality, about reality, about existence, about life, about ourself. About this question of who am I, about God maybe even, as it's the psychedelic acts as a genuine inquiry into truth, I would say. And then from that point, at least for me, I could identify certain, right? I could extract certain insights for myself and come to a direct embodied realization or recognition of certain traits of myself, of certain traits of existence itself, of love, of consciousness. For example, one profound one is the realization of perfection, the realization of beauty, the realization of selflessness. The realization of wholeness. All of these are kind of like aspects of this, of reality itself, of existence itself. Another insight might be that observation itself, awareness itself, is truth. And all of these insights, tired, give us perspective. Maybe everything we thought to be true isn't, right? Everything we thought we are not. And so we come to embodied perspectives, realizations, insights. We come to a personal understanding about ourselves and truth and reality, the nature of reality, based on personal experience. The personal direct experience is made primary through the psychedelic. I mean, it's primary either way, but it's easier to get lost in thought, right? When we when what's happening in the psychedelic experience when the default mode network is not being shut down. So it opens a possibility for deconstructing reality, basically. There's also certain nuances regarding dangers and integration regarding this point, but I want to move on for now. And the next point is basically the death rebirth process and the acceleration of spiritual growth. So this is kind of like what Chris Beige is talking about a lot in his book LSD and the Mind of the Universe, which is also speaking a bit to Groff's work and the kind of like perinatal matrices and coexistence that he laid out. And it speaks to this fundamental aspect of selflessness, to say that psychedelics are a practice of dying. We're dying over and over and over and over again as the psychedelic practice itself becomes kind of like a practice of purification. That's a very kind of like interesting concept, this concept of purification. And I see purification basically as a freeing ourselves of ourselves. And psychedelics have the potential to accelerate that cycle of purification that is happening. That the identification with the body, for example, is dissolving, then the identification with the mind, the identification, and it goes into these cycles of bigger and bigger identifications that are basically dying and being reborn, and dying and being reborn, and dying and being reborn in the archetypal realms up to the ultimate realms, and then even going beyond those. So, and in this process of death and dying, there's a certain suffering that is inherent in letting go of our sense of self and what we thought we were. And here it's also very interesting that psychedelics have a very deep similarity to near-death experiences. And there's a very similar kind of like pattern emerging from research into near-death experiences and deep psychedelic experiences. And then the fourth one is kind of like the reach for the absolute, right? When we look at the stages of spiritual development, we have a progression towards the absolute, basically, towards that absolute non-dual presence. And we move further and further and higher into infinity until we kind of like reach an experiential identification with the absolute. And that absolute goes by many, many names. And then, for example, maybe with 5-MeO-DMT, we have the potential to reach that absolute And also with the other psychedelics, there's a certain potential to reach that absolute, that full release, kind of like point of being beyond everything, a union with God. But even here, there's kind of like dangers and pitfalls, and the nuance of integration that we got to be aware of, right? Regarding the chase for the absolute, saying, and also an over identification with the absolute, or an attachment to this peak experience, saying, now I want to experience that absolute state of consciousness and that ultimate end state of spiritual development over and over and over again. But that's kind of like the trap that, or kind of like the breaking point between this first paradigm and the second paradigm, the relative and the absolute paradigm, that I want to move into next. Before I wrap this up, I'm really tired. I'm gonna go to bed now. Actually, I'm sorry, but as you might be already kind of like noticing, my mind is not very sharp and focused and on point right now. But this notion of moving from unawakened to awakened, from wounded to healed, from unwhole to whole, reinforces kind of like the tendency of an attachment to peak experiences, to judge them as better as, to say, to cultivate a certain preference within ourselves, to say, when we come down, we're like, I prefer being in a non-dual state of consciousness, or this absolute bliss, Satchitananda, peak experience of the absolute, than being in my ordinary day-to-day state consciousness. And there's a subtle kind of like dependency on peak states that one can develop, being in this notion of the developmental stages of spirituality, to say like, now I'm not as spiritually developed, and then I am. And then basically the practice of psychedelics becomes also one, or there's a tendency or trap of it then to become one of taking psychedelics to be more enlightened, to become more enlightened or realized fast, to eradicate the ego. So to conclude, before we go into the second section, is kind of like that, yes, psychedelics can catalyze spiritual progress by serving as a mirror for this inner work and tools for deepening insight, cultivating these traits, accelerating the death rebirth process, and giving us a glimpse in these peak experiences of the absolute. There is another paradigm, and this other paradigm is kind of like the transcendence of the seeking itself. So it's not the relative kind of progressive model of A to B, unawakened to awakened, but it's just A to A, basically. And because from the absolute perspective, it touches on the notion of non-dual traditions. Basically Zen Buddhism, Advaita Vedanta, Dzogchen, Christian mysticism, that state that this is it right here, right? There is no difference between A and B. It's one and the same. You are that already, right? There is the inherent Buddha nature in all of us already. It's all one already. And then from that point, basically, we can say like, who is it that wants to experience bliss? if there's no I to begin with, then why seek to transcend that? And also, as Bodhidharma said, kind of like this notion of seeking is the root of suffering. And to seek nothing is actual bliss. And I guess to seek nothing also means kind of like not to seek to be in a different state of consciousness than what you are already in. So if the absolute is everything, then it is also this moment right here, right now. And we move beyond progress, beyond chasing, beyond seeking. As all states of consciousness are valid, all appearances are it. There's no hierarchy of experience saying this experience is more spiritual than this experience. This state of consciousness is more spiritual than that state of consciousness. And that's quite a radical kind of like notion, but it transcends this first kind of paradigm and says that the highest realization is that there's nothing to attain, because it's already true, it's already it. And from this perspective, there is no spiritual path or spiritual journey at all. There's this funny meme I saw recently. It's kind of like this person digging a hole into the ground, and it says this is the spiritual journey. And then this is like, you start the journey, you dig the hole into the ground, and then you build the ladder, and then you crawl out of your hole that you dug for yourself. And then you're right at the end, you're like, woo! And you're right at the place where you started. You arrived there. The journey is an illusion, right? From this standpoint, we don't have to have a notion of a journey, because we're not trying to get anywhere. Because everything is already perfect. And this is kind of like where then the practice of detached appreciation is coming in. Because what I would say is that detached appreciation is a love, an infinite love for all states of consciousness, without attaching to them, but simply loving them, appreciating them, not preferring one state over another state, and seeing that as being a true spiritual practice. And then psychedelics can act as a foundational anchor, kind of like, or a test in that realization. And you go into the psychedelic experience and you see how much can I stay in that non-judgmental space of not attaching to any state of consciousness. Even when the bliss is coming, even when the love is coming, can we stay in this sense of detached appreciation? There's a beautiful quote by Bodhidharma that I love. He says, "Those unmoved by the wind of joy silently follow the path." Those unmoved by the wind of joy silently follow the path. I think that's so beautiful. And the same goes for the darker realms, for the nasty realms, for the suffering, for the pain, for the demons and the darkness. Staying in a sense of detached appreciation. How much can you stay in a detached appreciation even in those experiences, in the psychedelic experience itself? And from this sense of detached appreciation and not having a preference for one state over another, we also dissolve the notion of an intention for the psychedelic journey itself. And we say the psychedelic experience is not a means to an end, to progress on our spiritual development, but an end in and of itself. We do the psychedelic just because we do the psychedelic. Right? In the non-dual traditions, they also say that meditation is an end in and of itself. We're not meditating to be progressing on our spiritual path, but meditation itself is the embodiment of realization. So this is kind of like the core point of this kind of like second paradigm, the absolute perspective, the realization that everything is already accomplished. But the reality is, can you follow that absolute approach? Can you embody it? Yes or no? Because I can't. From right now and my present day-to-day experience, also especially in the last couple of days, and right now with this headache and inability to focus and really speak, and being very dissatisfied with the presentation right here and with the structure and how I'm presenting it, and all of this, what's going on for me right now, and being really tired, almost like falling asleep, I can't say that I'm fully in a state of detached appreciation. So we gotta be like merging those two and saying both of them might be true. Both of them are valid expressions of psychedelics as a spiritual practice. The notion that there's stages of development, that there's a progression on the spiritual path, and at the same time the transcendence of that. And it sounds like they can't come together and that they can't exist together, but that's the paradox, right? Just as we see it expressed in so many different traditions. The strict structure in a Zen Buddhist monastery, and the discipline to meditate and contemplate koan, while that's the realization itself. In Christianity, we have this quote, "Be still and know that I am God," with this kind of like the notion of purification and the striving for holiness, or the cultivation of virtues. So we can acknowledge kind of like the similarities, but also the disagreements, and come back to a place of surrender, a place of not knowing, a place of humility. And basically we can then live with that paradox, honor that paradox, and enjoy the journey, enjoy our life, enjoy the tension, the paradox, the suffering, the searching, all of it. Loving it, appreciating it to the best of our ability. And then go on this path of integrating this paradox and this tension. Avoid the traps of bypassing or of dogmatic progression. And move with as much ease into our journey as possible, with the appreciation of simple things. So, what are you guys saying in the chat? Kali's saying, is it more useful to trip in silence darkness or with psychedelic music? I think both is very beautiful and both is very useful. I guess there's no more useful or less useful than one over the other. There's value and beauty in both. I find that music can very beautifully guide the journey. and is definitely influencing and directing it to a certain degree. But also sometimes I feel that there's beauty in this silent darkness. But also it's a bit more like you gotta be gathering up a little bit more courage. At least me, like in the silent darkness, sometimes it's a bit more scary than having the comfort of some beautiful music guiding you and grounding you maybe a little bit as well in reality. Hey Pictimundi, good to see you. Yeah, guys, I'm really sorry that this is such a an all of the talk, all over the place kind of talk. I'm really confused and tired, so I'm gonna end this stream soon. But I appreciate you all hanging out here with me and listening to this. Linoard is saying, "Hi, have you ever smoked Moline before? I'm looking for non-psychoactive herb to smoke to get away from my weed addiction." Yes, I think I have smoked that herb before, and it was enjoyable. It was a nice smoke. I've seen a couple friends smoking it to get away from tobacco. Also, Blue Lotus is another one that many people use. What helped me to get away from weed was rape. So it was kind of like this tobacco that you blow up your nose with these funny kind of like applicants. But I don't know. There's a potential for another addiction to evolve, basically. Also, if you search my channel, you can maybe find some videos about cannabis. I did one or two really nice videos about how to quit smoking cannabis. Joel is saying, it's where are you perceive yourself sitting at the table of consciousness. Also saying, vaping or drinking Moline tea is for recuperating anytime you need a retreat for your lungs. Oh, it's beautiful that you guys are having this conversation here in the chat. Finding out the source of why you use Mary as a crutch instead of a guide would be most helpful. Most people have a type of stressor, but she'll just end up using another medicinal herb the same way. For me, it's really just wanting to smoke something. I don't want to get high, but I get what you're saying. I should find out the source why I want to smoke in the first place. Yeah, I told myself the same thing when I was smoking cannabis for 3 years every day. I told myself the same thing. It's like, I just enjoy the smoking. I enjoy the smoking. And even though that's true, I still do to this day very much enjoy the smoking. It doesn't have to, like, it doesn't mean that you have to smoke every single day. It doesn't even have to mean that you have to smoke once a week. Like, I smoke every couple of weeks now, at the moment at least. Some periods sometimes more, sometimes less, right? But right now I'm not smoking really anything other than maybe some 5-MeO DMT or DMT. But yeah, you can allow yourself to transcend that need to smoke. At least you can still enjoy it, but to really need it every day, then there's something happening. And also I found that one great thing is to find substitutes for changes in consciousness, getting high, right? For example, going for a run. I love going for a run, and it gives you a similar kind of like high than actually smoking cannabis. Yeah. Pictimuni is saying, the absolute self-reference to oneself was also defined in art theory as art pour d'art. I'm gonna Google that. That sounds beautiful. Ah, the art's for art's sake. That's beautiful. I love that. Yeah, exactly. That's kind of like the realization I had regarding psychedelics, and still I can't say that I'm fully practicing it. Joel is saying many times it is just the patterns. It may be just that you are looking for more patterns to do and replacing a pattern that is more similar just in one way. Thanks for the stream. Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for being here. Rory Kingsnor, the best solution to stop using alcohol once aware it's bad for you. Yeah, maybe get really aware on how bad it is for you. That sometimes helps some people at least to really dig even deeper and then say like, wow, come to such a deep recognition of its damage that the desire for it is decreasing. That happened for me with certain foods. Like I can't really enjoy or eat certain foods anymore, where I just realized like this is so bad for me. Like this is so much garbage that I just can't eat it. I just can't eat it anymore. The same could work for alcohol as well. But alcohol, there's also a kind of like I think a physical dependency that is developing when you're using it too much. So yeah, alcohol I don't have too many advices on. Also, yeah, and I want to be very careful with giving advice regarding this. But first of all, seek out help. I know lots of people who are like, if you have a problem with alcohol, then Alcoholics Anonymous has a very nice program. Don't be afraid to look for help, to hold each other accountable. Support groups, community is a very beautiful aspect. You can join our Psychedelic Actualization Path to Purpose community. Finding a purpose in your life, I've found, is one of the best catalysts to stop any addiction. Because, for example, with the work I'm doing and the purpose I've set for myself, like I couldn't allow myself at one point or another anymore to be sloppy in my day-to-day approach and just smoke cannabis all day long and chill and play video games. I just couldn't allow myself to do that because it was damaging my path too much. And so if you have a strong enough reason, a big enough vision for your life on what's really important for you and what you want to work towards and realize in your life, then the sacrifices, like sacrificing certain cannabis, like I even sacrificed the rapé now because I saw it was not serving me anymore. They become much easier if you have a strong enough reason to move forward and to develop and embody a certain version of yourself that is in alignment with that big vision and is able then to realize that on a day-to-day basis. Picti saying, the fluctuations, variations within the constant general state of everything must be allowed, otherwise there are no movement in one's own self and the individual perception of inside and outside. I love that. I'm going to take that into my presentation. I love that, Picti. You're like you're a genius philosopher. So I think it's fine not to be constant in all your actions and thoughts. That's absolutely agree. I absolutely agree. Okay, guys, I'm getting really tired. It was a long day for me, and I'm really struggling with this presentation. I'm not satisfied. I'm not satisfied with the structure of this presentation. I was not satisfied with the delivery of the different aspects of it in this little live stream and video here. which is interesting. That was basically the purpose of this live stream, to test it out and to double check a little bit. And now I have a little bit more clarity around how shitty my idea is. That's beautiful. Which is gonna set me back to zero tomorrow. And as I said, only 4 days left to come up with a really good presentation. If you have any other insights regarding how to structure a talk about psychedelics as a spiritual practice, then yeah, feel free to message me. Come follow me on Instagram, message me, join our community. Let's get a conversation going. I would love to hear your input. And otherwise, yeah, I'm gonna sing one more song, just for the sake of it, for the sake of our tradition here. But yeah, ooh, ha. Govinda Narayana, Gopala Narayana, Govinda Narayana, Gopala Narayana, Govinda Gopala Narayana, Govinda Gopala Narayana, Hari Govinda Gopala Narayana, Hari Govinda Gopala Narayana, Govinda Narayana, Gopala Narayana, Govinda Narayana, Gopala Narayana, Govinda Gopala Narayana, Govinda Gopala Narayana, Hari Govinda Gopala Narayana, Hari Govinda Gopala Narayana, Hari Govinda Gopala Narayana, Hari Govinda Gopala Narayana. Govinda is another name or an aspect of Krishna. This was a mantra for the protection of the world and all beings. Hare Krishna. So thank you all for being here. Joel, Big T, Kali, Rory, Lenward. I love you all. Woody D, much appreciated. And yeah, I'll end here. I'll see you in the next one. If you're curious to come join our community, link is in the video description, or watch the full masterclass for a better pointing and explanation and argumentation of what I tried to bring across here. There is a better worked out scripted argumentation and presentation for psychedelics as a spiritual practice in that masterclass. And yeah, really, if you haven't, really check it out. It's a really good one. I posted the link in first link in the video description and in the chat as well. And otherwise, I love you all. Beautiful rest of your day. I'm gonna go and cry in my bed right now because I am completely overwhelmed by the task of wrapping my mind around the topic of psychedelics as a spiritual practice and how to present it in an academic setting. I love it. Oh, I love this work. Why am I doing all of this? But it's very beautiful. It's the greatest